Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and thank you for joining me today on Pivot on Hilaal TV. My very special guest today is Fatima Essop, who is a founding member of the Muslim Family Law Hub. She has practiced both as an attorney and an advocate, and she has come from the College of South Africa, IPSA, it's the Islamic Peace College of South Africa. She has a certification in Islamic finance from the Ethica Institute of Islamic Finance from the UAE and a PhD in law from the University of Cape Town. She was a fellow at Harvard Law School in the program on law and society in the Muslim world in 2022 and 2023. Fatima researches and publishes in the area of Muslim family law and advocates for more just and equitable readings of Islamic law texts pertaining to Muslim family laws. She firmly believes in using law as an instrument for social justice. And this is very important in the time that we are in, considering that the ICC, the ICJ, and international law is significantly being questioned by people across the world. These are international instruments of law, but for the majority of us who sit and look at the way in which things are unfolding in Gaza, we have begun to question the value of law, the ability of law to bring about social justice, and the value of law to hold people to account. Now in Islam, law is very important, but it is not law that governs us, but a belief in the Creator, in Allah the One. And it is our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that allows us to act in society and to shape the way in which we function without constantly worrying about being sanctioned or about the law that can hold us accountable. So Islamic law is very important to the way in which we live our lives. And for this, I would like to welcome then Fatima Essop to this program. Thank you, Fatima, for being here with us.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Gracia, and thank you for having me.
Fatima, you have done some significant work with regards to Muslim family law, but recently you've launched the hub. Tell us a little bit about this hub and why was it important and necessary to launch it?
Okay, so the Muslim Family Law Hub, we're aiming to advocate and educate for more equitable Muslim family law outcomes in South Africa. As you know, Muslims are 2% minority in South Africa, and historically our Muslim family laws were not recognized as valid, including our laws, our marriages, and neither were our divorces regulated by the state, and neither is our inheritance law enforceable in terms of actual South African law as legislation. And so historically we've practiced our Muslim family law predominantly in the private sphere. But that, of course, has meant that there were certain disadvantages that women especially suffered as a result of that non-recognition. And for years now, for decades since democracy, there have been various parties advocating, academics, practitioners, NPOs advocating for the recognition of Muslim family law. And when I was at the program doing my fellowship at Harvard in the program on law and society in the Muslim world, I realized that what was needed, that people, most Muslims, they either would know the Islamic law, and even then they wouldn't know all their rights and responsibilities under Islamic law. Practitioners would know South African law, but there was a need to educate people on both systems and how it would apply to them, but not in a way that was inaccessible. So there are many academics who have done, and scholars who have done excellent work in writing in this area, but we felt there was a need to make the law accessible to lay people, and hence the idea of the hub came about, where we would basically, one of the resources of the hub is the website, which is a resource we hope people will be able to use and benefit from, which makes both Islamic law and South African law in an easy, sets it out in an easy, accessible manner for people to navigate their life's journey from marriage to divorce to inheritance. And that was the idea behind the Muslim Family Hub initially. And of course, the website is one of our resources, but as our objective illustrates, we hope to educate the public on these various rights and responsibilities. And so we're hoping to have various educational programs and workshops on both Islamic law and South African law of marriage, divorce, and inheritance.
So thank you for that wonderful explanation, Fatima. And it's true, because many South African women don't realize the rights that they have in terms of Islamic law. And unfortunately, we've found that over the years, our scholars have done us a grave injustice by the way in which they have handled marriages, divorces, especially gender-based violence within Islamic marriages, etc., within Muslim homes for that matter. And so I'm sure that the Muslim Hub will pick up on all of this. But now, the Hub, tell me, when you say that you've made it accessible, are you simply just stipulating what the rights are, or are you offering services, for example, access to a legal person, access to counseling, what you should do, what shouldn't you do, arbitration and those kinds of things? Because you have also done extensive work in terms of mediation.
Yeah. So, Qureisha, at this stage, we registered as a non-profit company. And we are self-funded. We haven't even gone out to fundraise for the NPO. And so we have limited resources. And at this stage, what our offering is the website, which is a resource for the community. If anybody has data or Wi-Fi, is able to access the information on the website for free. Aside from setting out under each marriage, divorce, and inheritance doors the rights and responsibilities in terms of Islamic law and South African law, what we have also created is a checklist under each particular door. So whether you're entering a marriage, what are the considerations when you're navigating marriage that you should consider in terms of your marriage, Muslim marriage contract? What do you include? What are the things you should consider before finalizing your contract, both in terms of Islamic law? So we're looking at issues around mahar or including the talaq, tafweed, and then as well in South African law. Will you get married in terms of in community, out of community, antenuptial, etc.? And similarly, that's the case with divorce and inheritance. And so we have Islamic law, South African law, but then we also have a checklist. And lastly, because we don't have the resources at this stage or the capacity, and inshallah, maybe at some stage when we have sufficient funding, we can employ people to actually provide a legal advice service. But at this stage, we also have a fourth tab under each door, which is a resource tab. And there are some resources at the moment, but we're in the process of uploading more. And so that resource tab will essentially refer people to who the various service providers in the community that they can approach for under each particular door. So, for instance, under the marriage door, for instance, many people don't know who the imams are that are marriage officers. There's a list of imams that are marriage officers in South Africa, and if they officiate of your marriage and they follow the proper processes, then your marriage would be a civil marriage as well as an Islamic marriage. So we, for instance, uploaded the list of imams. We've also intending to uplift the details of lawyers you can consult for your antenuptial contracts or your marriage contracts. Similarly, in divorce, we intend uploading when we find that when women are undergoing divorce, there are 3 areas they generally need assistance with. And that is they need legal advice, they need inevitably financial assistance because they've been financially disempowered during the marriage, and at the end of the marriage they find themselves on the back foot financially. And thirdly, they inevitably need some kind of counseling, psychological counseling, to deal with the trauma and the fallout of divorce. And so what the objective is to upload resources under each of those areas. And so, for instance, under divorce, for instance, women don't necessarily know how do they go about getting the Islamic divorce. So we'll provide the ulama bodies that will give you a fasa, or the lawyers who can institute a divorce for you, because now in terms of South African law, the president signed in the Divorce Amendment Act in May, even if you're married by Islamic law, you can now institute a divorce proceeding in the civil courts. And who are the lawyers who can assist you in that regard? On the mental health care side, we've chatted to various service providers, and we intend uploading it very soon, who are the mental health care professionals who can assist you to navigate the post-divorce trauma. So just by way of example, I met a few weeks back somebody from the counseling hub here in Cape Town. They, for instance, offer counseling to women, or anybody for that matter, at 50 Rand a session over a period of 6 weeks. And people are not necessarily aware of these services within the community. And then under the financial, for instance, people don't necessarily know that SANZAF assists women, for instance, if she has arrears rental, if she has lawyer's fees, that is a debt, they'll assist her with that. So those are the kind of resources we are intending to upload. So no, us as the hub, we are not giving legal advice at this stage because we don't have the resources, but we will provide the community with direction as to where to go.
Yes, so this is actually very much needed because people really don't know what to do, how to do it, and how to access the information that is available, because I know that in South Africa there are very many people who are supportive, but we just don't know how to access them. But we have to go to a break right now. When we come back, I want to take up further questions with you, but I'll see you after the break.
Thanks, pleasure.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the second segment of Pivot today on Hilaal TV with my very special guest, Fatima Essop, and we're speaking about this amazing hub that has been launched by Fatima and some other dynamic women who have come together to contribute resources so that Muslims in South Africa can have access to these resources and improve the way in which we manage our lives, especially within the sphere of Islamic family law. Now, Fatima, you spoke about right at the start about South African law and Muslim law, and you have these both running parallel on your website. I'm curious to know that in terms of Islamic family law, is there a similarity, or are both the laws, South African law, which is a secular law, it is a non-Islamic law, it is a non-religious law, is it similar to the family law that we find in Islam? And do these processes complement each other, or are there significant differences that Muslims will have to learn to navigate?
So there are differences, of course. They're two completely different systems. So on a basic level, for instance, in Islamic marriage law, for instance, the husband, it's commonly understood by all scholars, that the husband has the duty to maintain the wife and the family to nafaka. In South African law, for instance, both parties have a duty of support towards each other. In South African law, you don't necessarily have the mahar or the dowry requirement, whereas in Islamic law, that is one of the conditions of a marriage, is that the woman is entitled to ask for a dowry. What's interesting, though, is that in Islamic law, the marriage is a sacred bond, but it's also a contract. And what people inevitably seem to overlook is that you can actually negotiate whatever conditions you as parties decide to put into that contract. Similarly, in divorce, in South African law, there are essentially three grounds for obtaining a divorce. If the person is mentally incapacitated, but one of the main grounds is irretrievable breakdown. Parties simply have to show that there's been an irretrievable breakdown in the marriage and that they've been separated for I think it's 6 months. But as you know, in Islamic law, Islamic divorce law is very complex, right? You have the talaq, which is considered the unilateral right of the husband, unless he's delegated that right to his wife, either at the start of the marriage or during the marriage. And then the woman, very, very often, this happens very often, is that men, even if they're at fault, would refuse to give the woman the talaq, and she'd then have to apply for a fasakh, right, which is essentially an annulment of the marriage based on whatever, it's a fault. She has to prove that there are grounds. Either he did a nafaka her, or he was abusive, etc. And as you know, in Islamic law, you have different opinions according to the different schools. So I know that sisters in Johannesburg might find it far harder to obtain a fasakh because of the Hanafi madhab having very restrictive grounds to obtain a fasakh, where sisters in Cape Town might find it easier. And so this is very different to the South African law, which, as I indicated, the main grounds is for you to simply show that there was a irretrievable breakdown. In South African law, we have a no-fault divorce system,
Okay, so
whereas in Islamic law, that's not the case.
so in the case of situations, and I think we're finding this much more on a larger scale in terms of Muslim marriages in South Africa, where the men are refusing to divorce the woman, and these women are muta'allika, they're just hanging. They're neither here, they're neither married, they're neither divorced. What is the recourse for women in these circumstances? And, you know, based on what you have put up on the hub, will women find it easier to access scholars maybe in another town, in another city, and then get help if the scholars in their cities or in their towns are not helping them?
So that's right. So this is the idea behind the website was to give women the knowledge and the agency. So you'll see in the website, we send out what are the grounds for a fasakh, and we set out the grounds for the Shafi, the Hanafi, and the Maliki, which is the broadest in terms of the Malika madhab. So, for instance, in the Malika madhab, there are numerous grounds, very broad. Emotional abuse is considered a grounds, financial abuse. She can apply for a fasakh. And then the one question which I specifically included, so the way the website is set up is a Q&A section, Quraisha. Initially, I gave the web designers my chapters of my thesis and articles, and they said, nobody's going to read that. You need to put it into digestible format. And so we decided on the Q&A format. And one of the questions I ask is, my husband and I are both Hanafi. Can we still rely on the Maliki grounds to obtain a fasakh? And I indicate in there, yes, you can, by the use of the doctrine of Tawfiq. And Tawfiq allows you, is the Islamic doctrine which allows you to move between madhaib if there's a need, right? And so I indicate there, so for instance, your qadi is entitled to use the Maliki grounds even if you are practicing Hanafi, to grant you exit from the marriage based in a fasakh application. Whether parties and ulama bodies actually apply that, that's a different story in the northern provinces. But at least women know, and they can start challenging and saying, but actually there is this classical Islamic doctrine which says you are allowed to apply another madhab to my case, and that I'm entitled to get out of the marriage. Yes, he nafakas me. Yes, I have, but he's abusive. And that is the reason I want out. And in the Maliki madhab, that's the grounds for a fasakh. So that's another question on whether, on the ground, ulama. But I know, Quraisha, that there are women from Gauteng who come down to Cape Town to apply for their fasakhs because they know at least a year they're going to get it, whereas it's maybe harder for them to obtain it in Gauteng or maybe even KZN.
So to do this process, does it cost money? How do they go about it? Do they need money? Do they need access? Like how when you access the lawyer, you have to pay for fees, etc. So in this case, what is the situation for women?
So this is very interesting. So we at the moment, obviously, most of our I've done ethnographical research on Islamic divorce in the Western Cape. And in fact, this is something, if there are lawyers out in Gauteng and KZN, to feel free to reach out to me. I'll give my details because we'd like to know how the Islamic law processes work in those provinces. But in the Western Cape, for instance, you have ulama. There are 3 known ulama bodies who will provide you with who will process your fasakh application. And they have an agreement with each other, for instance, that if you decide to institute your process fasakh application in one ulama body, then the others won't necessarily take on your matter. But you make a very important point, Quraisha, in that, and this is something I've been discussing with the ulama bodies. When I go to a South African court, I know exactly what the process is. I know that if I issue a summons, there's a certain amount of days where the defendant has a time to reply, then I get a chance, then he gets a chance to file his pleadings, and I get a chance. It's all written out there. It's clear, it's certain. what I find is lacking is that people don't know upfront what the processes are. There's no clear set out process on the due process, and that's very important. I think the community, they are entitled to know what that is, and I think that is one of the what we're going to be advocating for, is that ulama bodies upfront inform the community on their websites that these are the processes you have to undergo. So at some of the ulama bodies, you'll pay a nominal fee, and we're talking like 50 to 100 rand, and you'll have to go through counseling first, 1 or 2 sessions. And once you've gone through that, your matter gets referred to Sharia court, where it then gets heard by the Qadi or panel. And based on that, they will then grant you your fasakh. That's how it happens in Cape Town. I'm hoping that I can reach out to people in Gauteng and in Durban, especially, to provide me with information on how ulama bodies operate in those regions.
This is fascinating. You make a very interesting what shall I say, reflection here, because I find that in many ways the entire approach to jurisprudence in terms of the ulama bodies in South Africa has been very laissez-faire. You know, they only address it when and if they need to, and if there's pressure on them. But there doesn't seem to be this discipline, the structure, like you said, in which people are very fundamentally aware of their rights, how to access it from the ulama body, and you find people are up in arms. We went here and then we were told to come back. We went there and we were told to come back, and they're not ready for this and they're not ready for that, which is really an indictment on us, because Islam is such a structured religion. It's a deen, with the greatest of discipline and with easy, accessible laws that should not be difficult. As Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said, "Ad-dinu yusra," the religion is easy. So everything about
That's
it is
right.
supposed to be easy. And yes, if you have difficulty in your marriage, there are ways to address it. The Quran lays
Absolutely.
it out. Yes, but our jurisprudence also lays it out. So we're almost at the end of this segment, Fatima, and I would just like your concluding thoughts on what it is that you feel is most important that South African Muslims should do, what the ulama bodies in terms of Islamic jurisprudence should do, and how Muslim lawyers who don't have any knowledge of Islamic law can participate to bring about the reality of and the haqq of Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam when he said, "Ad-dinu yusra."
Yeah, I think it's very important, and this is one of the main ideas behind the website, was people need to take responsibility and exercise agency and start educating themselves on their basic rights within the family law context, because that gives them some level of empowerment and agency to exercise it at each point, whether it's marriage, divorce, and inheritance. But then also there's limits to what even us as an NPO can do. People themselves, communities themselves, need to advocate for change. So if you see, but this is a right and it's accepted in Islam, why are we not being educated about this? Why is it not an option? And people themselves from the grassroots need to advocate for that and to advocate for the change. Like I'm explaining to you, they need to say, but so many women come to me, they don't know what are the processes. Well, we need to advocate and insist that ulama bodies need to start informing the community. Well, this is, here we go. It's, my son goes to the barber, he can do an appointment online on his phone. Similarly, ulama bodies should be able to develop in an age of AI and technology. We should be able to utilize all the different forms of technology to make it easier to facilitate the process, so that it's not such a sometimes very humiliating experience for the woman to kind of obtain an exit from a marriage. And you're right. Of course, we advocate for people to remain for marriages and just and happy marriages, but Islam does provide us with an out and says that the parties should part in kindness, and this is the role of ulama, is to facilitate this. And also very importantly is that we must be aware of our rights in terms of Islamic law, and I don't think necessarily, I think it's a responsibility of ulama bodies also to educate themselves about that, because we're not living in a vacuum. We live in South Africa, and we are therefore bound by those laws, and we need to educate. So I think education is very important, and then advocating for the changes that we want to see happening within Muslim family law.
Thank you so much for that detailed explanation. And I want to go out with this reminder to the people that ultimately, even though they are ulama bodies and they are legal professions, the instruction of Iqra came to Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it is incumbent upon every Muslim to seek the knowledge, seek it, seek your rights, find out. The world today is very accessible, knowledge is accessible. Don't only be dependent, learn to be independent. So with that, thank you, Fatima, for being here with us. Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Islam.
And with that, we come to the end of this particular interview with our guest, Fatima. You can access the Muslim Family Hub on the website. We will put it up on the screen so that you know where to find it. And please, help yourselves. Let us become an ummah that is totally empowered by learning, by seeking, by inculcating in us the very first injunction that came, and that is Iqra, read. Read, read, and read, and help yourselves. Do not be complacent, and do not put yourself in a situation where you are humiliated. Fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.